So welcome everyone to our webinar today. This is part of the CSE's Development and Action webinar series. And before we begin, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Evangeline and I'm the Alumni Engagement Officer. So big welcome to all our Commonwealth scholars and alumni who are joining the live webinar today. Today's webinar topic is stakeholders of terrorism within the Caribbean context. Quite an interesting topic. And delivering this webinar today, we have Commonwealth alumnus, Dr. Emanuel Patrick Quashie. Dr. Emanuel, if I haven't pronounced your last name correctly, please do let me know. Please correct me. Dr. Emanuel is a 2018 Commonwealth PhD scholar from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He completed his PhD in politics at Queen's University, Belfast. He's currently a lecturer in the Department of Government at the University of West Indies, Mona, Jamaica. He has over 7 years of experience as a qualitative researcher and an international relations specialist. Fun fact, drawing on his Commonwealth PhD research, Dr. Emanuel has recently published a book titled Stakeholders of Terrorism and the Caribbean, a short case study published by the Palgrave Macmillan. And in this webinar today, he will be sharing further information about this topic and also about the book. As I mentioned, if you have any questions, please do send them in the chat box. But without any further ado, Dr. Emanuel, a huge welcome to our webinar today, and over to you now. Please do let me know when you'd like me to change the slides.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. So without further ado, let me get right into it. As the host had said, my presentation is going to be on terrorism within the Caribbean. So I will start first to talk a little bit about being a Commonwealth scholar and doing my PhD and why I choose this topic. And then I will also talk a little bit about terrorism and the Caribbean, and also some recommendations, the SDG goal as well, and also future work. Bear with me just a little bit. When I get a little bit nervous, I tend to stutter. So forgive me, please, if you hear me stutter along the way. So yes, so let me start. So being a student as a Commonwealth scholar was quite a fascinating experience, and it is one that I cherish quite a lot, and I show all of you as well cherished it, and those of you who are also current Commonwealth scholars as well. Doing my PhD at Queen's, it was quite an interesting, but also quite a fun experience as well. I enjoy Queen's, but not just only the university alone, but also being in Belfast as well. The city is very nice. The city is very rich with a lot of cultures, but also the folks are quite nice as well. And I see Belfast as my second home. I really love it there. Also, what I find with the school is that the staff, all of the staff, were absolutely nice. They were absolutely helpful as well, not just only those who were directly involved in my PhD, but also a lot of the administrative staffs as well. So they were, they played a critical role in my studies and also my time at Queen's as well. Coming down to defending and completing the PhD, I could remember it quite vividly as if it was yesterday. The nerves prior to doing the defense, I was so nervous as well. But when I finished, I felt such a relief because it was quite a lot of work. It was 3 years of doing considerable research. And then now you had to defend this work. So I came out successful at the end. But it was quite a lot. It was quite a lot. And it was a difficult task, but I was able to complete it nonetheless. So I will talk a little bit about some of the challenges and stuff now. I think the next slide now. So in embarking on this research, the common question that I was asked is why I decided to study terrorism, given that the Caribbean haven't really experienced terrorism that much compared to other regions. And folks was, a lot of my friends and other folks was, why I didn't study, climate change, which is something that affects us on a regular, every day. We are living the potential horrors of climate change. And my response was, well, there's a lot of persons who are doing climate change. So they needed someone else to also fill the gap that has not been filled. And that's where I come in. So that is also part of my motivation to doing the study as well. And also the significance of the research, the very fact that terrorism is not seen as a high or top priority when it comes to existential threats or exogenous threats to the region. But it is, and I think that if we overlook it, it can be potentially damaging to our region in the future as well. So I wanted to take a more proactive approach as opposed to a preventative approach. The development impact of my research so far is evident in the fact that I was able to get a couple of publications. The host already mentioned that I got my book, my first book, but I also got a journal article that was recently published as well a few weeks ago in one of the leading terrorism studies journal as well. And that one is on the war on terror and its impact on the region as well. I have also done other publications as well, not necessarily related to terrorism, but also during my time, I was also doing some additional research as well. Because part of my time at Queen's, I was able to enhance and improve my qualitative research skills as well. Future impact, however, I am hoping that my research as well as publication can help in many ways to amend the current counter-terrorism policies that we have, and also make it a more salient issue, an issue that I think all stakeholders, that being government as well as regional institutions as well, to address the issue of terrorism. Even though they do have some policies, I think I call it sort of like sleeping. So I think that we need to do more to be more active as well, and also be more proactive as well. Yes, come on again. So, now we are going to talk about the book, because I think that we also covered the outcome of the Commonwealth Scholarship, which of course resulted in the book. But in addition to that, just a side note, the Commonwealth Scholarship also in many ways resulted not just in me having some publications, but also resulted in me being gainfully employed as well as a lecturer, because one of the requirements of being a full-time lecturer is that you must have a PhD. And I was able to garner a PhD, thanks in large part, to the Commonwealth Scholarship as well. Come on down a little bit. So I'm going to ask a question in terms of how many of you know about terrorism within the Caribbean? You can either answer by a show of hands or send the message.
Yes, you can raise your hand in the emoji hand, or you could say a yes, or very briefly mention if you know the answer, or if you know of any terrorism activities in the Caribbean in the chat box. We will take a few seconds.
Yes. They will have to think about it.
Yeah,
okay,
we already have, somebody has already said they don't know about it. And
right,
that goes for me as well. That goes for me.
Yes.
I wasn't aware of it.
Yes, right. Okay,
Yep.
good.
Participants do know of some in Haiti.
Yes.
But yeah, most of the questions are no.
Okay, so most of it is no, and many of you say that you didn't know, you don't have an idea as well. Okay, so that seems to be the common response. Okay, so let's take a very quick and brief ride to the history of terrorism within the region. But we wouldn't stay too long, because I want to also cover some other important areas as well, and then have time to also answer some questions as well. So come on the next slide. Yes, so as you can see here, I also have a table that briefly shows some of the terrorist activities as well. And I am sure that you will be able to review this after the presentation, so we don't have to go through every single one of them. But I just want to touch on about two of them, particularly the one as it relates to the bombing of the Cuban airline in Barbados. And the reason why, it is because interestingly, the 1976 bombing of the Cuban airline, I will argue, was the first sort of attack, a terrorist attack by means of attacking an airline within the Western Hemisphere. And this happened before 9/11, which I am sure all of you know about the September 11, 2001 terrorist attack in the United States. But this one actually happened within the Caribbean, and this was in 1976, where they blew up an airline that just left the airport in Barbados. So we actually had our first sort of um, um, I don't want to say 9/11 attack because um, I think by saying that it might sort of downgrade or so forth the um, impact that 9/11 had. But the point I'm trying to make here, or the point I'm trying to illustrate here, is that before there was the attack in 2001 by an airline, the Caribbean had such an attack. Also, the Trinidad one, which is the only, which was the first and still remains the only attack by Islamist jihadists within the Western Hemisphere as well, in terms of an attack on the government and also in terms of a potential coup as well. But the interesting thing is when the attack in Trinidad had happened, it was not necessarily deemed as a terrorist attack per se, because during that time we didn't really had counter-terrorism policies or any sort of terrorism-related policies at that time. In fact, Trinidad and Tobago anti-terrorism legislation came into effect over a decade after, I think, somewhere in 2005. So yes, so those are the two that I really wanted to talk about, and you will be able to look at the rest on your own time as well. So come on down a bit more. So just to give you an overview of the series of terrorism or terroristic activities within the region. Someone just messaged and said that they were too young to know what happened before 1990 as well. Okay, so yes, so I figured that as well. I would have been too young to know what happened in 1976. But yes, so what the stakeholders of terrorism really is about, that it looks at non-state actors. And I really needed to stress that because I know that some persons also talk about terrorism from the state standpoint, but we would not be talking about state terrorism because that tends to draw up a lot of controversial debates as well. So my stakeholders of terrorism is focused on non-state actors. And what I'm really looking at is the inherent duality that really exists in terrorism. And what that means in a nutshell is the simultaneous negatives as well as positive that tends to exist in any matter concerning terrorism activism. And it was important for me to stress the inherent duality because oftentimes, anytime you hear terrorism, the focus tends to be on the negative. And I could understand why. If you take it from Professor Louise Richardson, one of the persons who I had the privilege of interviewing during my research as well. And Professor Louise Richardson is a world-renowned expert on terrorism. But a lot of you might not know this, but she was also the vice chancellor of Oxford University at the time when I interviewed her. But I got access to her after I said I am a Commonwealth scholar as well. So yes. Uh, but what she said is that while she acknowledges that there are indeed some benefits to terrorism, which is the positives, which is defined as positive within my stakeholders of terrorism concept, she argued that the negatives are overwhelming. And probably that's the reason why there is such a focus, a heavy focus on the negatives of terrorism. But I think it's important and critical to also take into consideration the positives of terrorism if we are to effectively counter terrorism in a faceted as well as multi-dimensional manner as well. Come on down a bit. Yes, and I think that I actually jump ahead by explaining the negatives and the positives as well. But these are just some of the bullet points in terms of what was some of the negatives as well as some of the positives within the Caribbean context as well. So I'm just going to read out just one or two. And you will be able to read the rest on your own time as well. For the sake of time, I wouldn't be able to read all of them. But some of the negatives were, let's say, a yearning for respect, a sense of belonging, but also a sense of adventure as well as not being well versed in the Muslim faith, among others as well. The positives here will also be a sense of increased social status, but also a sense of respect, influence, also power in the street as well, and feeling like you are participating in a great cause, fighting for something meaningful as well. You're also searching for meaning and purpose in your life as well. Some of you might be wondering, but there are some of the teams that are in the same category as well. And this is where the stakeholders of terrorism becomes quite illuminating as well, because what it is trying to show you is that these categories, both the negative and the positive, do not strictly adhere to a rigid antagonistic sort of separation. So sometimes you will have them interweaving with each other as well. Come on a little bit more. So after finding some of those themes in my studies, I propose a few recommendations as well. And some of these are to establish a community program. Now, this idea is established in Trinidad, but I want it to be region-wide. And I believe that it will address quite a lot of the potential causal effects, but also simultaneously address quite a lot of the beneficial effects as well. And develop also an educational program as well. But this must be more at the secondary as well as tertiary level as well. And we need to stress the risk and also consequences of joining a terrorism group. And here is the reason why. Remember when I talk about what was some of the positives in terms of why persons from the region migrated to join ISIS. Let me pull up one of them. One of the reasons was they yearn for a sense of adventure. And what this means is that a lot of them who went to join ISIS, they went to join thinking that they will come back alive, and that didn't happen at all. So we need to educate persons more on the risk and also consequences of joining a terrorist group. Many also went because they sought to improve their economic well-being as well, and they lost their life. So they did not, or was not able to improve their economic well-being, obviously because they lost their life as well. So we need to stress this, and the educational program is important at the tertiary level. And you're probably wondering why, because persons who graduate with a degree should at least, you know, have the capacity to know that if you join a terrorist group, that there will be tremendous negative impact or effect on your life. However, my research found that quite a lot of the persons who migrated to join ISIS were highly educated persons. So persons who graduated with a degree in law, persons who graduated with a degree in medical studies as well, but also persons with a degree in engineering studies as well. So you have a lot of highly educated persons migrating to join ISIS. And lastly, I also urge for more moderate imams as well. And one of the reasons why, uh, because you have also one of the threats in terms of terrorism within the Caribbean context is the threats that extremist religious leaders also pose. So you need moderate imams to sort of act as a counter narrative to those sort of extremist religious leaders' words or speeches or statements that they will use to sort of radicalize and help to recruit disaffected youths or any other persons who feel a sense of, let's say, marginalized or a sense of social exclusion as well. Come on. And yes, and of course, I had to also think of my study within the broader context of the SDG goals. And mine's fall perfectly within peace, justice, and also strong institutions as well. And why is that so? If you look at the 9/11 attack, which was a terrorist attack, when the 9/11 attack occurred, it also had a ripple effect around the globe. It also had a major impact on international peace. Because what happened is that the 9/11 attack did not just only create a space of exception within the United States, but it created an international space of exception as well, which resulted not only in the war on terror being just about invading Afghanistan or the Iraq war in 2003. It also resulted in a lot of changes in terms of immigration, in terms of international engagement with the banking sector as as well. And it also saw a lot of other countries who did not have anti-terrorism legislations in place had to also put anti-terrorism legislation in place as well. So what you had happen is, one, international peace was affected because you had the global war on terrorism, which resulted, of course, in the Afghanistan and Iraq war, and other small wars as well, and other areas and regions being affected as well. Justice and strong institutions were also, um, 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 as a result, impacted in many ways, because many states now had to um, improve their institutions through anti-terrorism laws and policies to strengthen them to deal with the issue of global terrorism as well. And this is why it perfectly fits in this SDG goal. Future work as well. So currently, I am also engaging in future research work as it relates to terrorism. But what I am specifically focusing on now is also the war on the terror and how it really impacted the region. Because there isn't much studies or much literature in the prevailing literature, or scholarship, I should say, in the prevailing literature in terrorism studies as it relates to the war on terror and how it impacted the Caribbean as well. And also, I am doing other terrorism related research as well. Some of the challenges in terms of this particular research is trying to gather some of the data. It's really difficult to get to interview some of the experts and some of the persons who are in charge in a lot of the terrorism policies, but also institutions that deals with combating terrorism as well. So it's really difficult to gather data from some of those persons. Also getting access to other stakeholders as well, such as imams, because I would like to know and hear from them in terms of how the global war on terrorism may or may not have impacted their lives, given that there has been studies about the Muslim community, let's say in North America and other parts of the world as well. I would also like to work with other, or collaborate with other regional bodies as well, such as CARICOM impacts, and also regional security systems as well, but also international national bodies as well, such as the UN Office for Counter-Terrorism. And also, importantly, I would like to work with regional governments as well. Hopefully, they work with me, not just only work with me, but also take into serious consideration a lot of my recommendations as well. So yes, and I think this is probably, yes, so come on. I think this is probably the end of my presentation. So now we reach the question and answer section. Yay!
Thank you so much. That was a brilliant presentation. I can already see your hand raised, but I would request you to please send your questions in the chat box, and I will make sure to address them from the chat box if you don't mind. Thank you. So as you can see, Emmanuel, we do have questions coming in the chat box.
Yes.
But if you are ready, I would start with a few questions that we have
Yes.
received in the registration form.
Yes.
So my first question to you is, how is terrorism in the Caribbean different from other regions?
Yes, and that's a very, very good question as well. Um, so in my research that I have done, and I will try my utmost best to answer it based on my findings. But again, I am currently doing more research, and I'm guessing and I'm hoping that it will also add new themes, new content to my research as well. But the difference that I will say so far is that a lot of the persons who migrated to join ISIS is different in many ways from a lot of the persons who migrated to join ISIS, let's say in North America and Europe. And I want to point to a study to sort of add validity to my point. There was some studies done by Roy and Keppel, and what they found is that a lot of persons who migrated from North America as well as Europe as well, is that when they migrated to join ISIS, they migrated because they had a fascination with extreme violence. So it was their fascination with extreme violence. In the Caribbean, however, what I found is that a lot of the persons who migrated to join ISIS didn't have this sort of fascination with extreme violence at all. They more migrated because they had a sense of adventure, a sense of identity as well. They also, in many ways, went because they wanted to improve their economic well-being as well. And also, a lot of them wanted to see their social status increase as well. They wanted more power and influence in the street as well. And the reason why is because a lot of the persons who went were also, in many ways, low-level criminals as well. And just claiming that they had a connection to ISIS will also increase their power and social status, which will then translate into economic gains as well. So that is some of the differences that I saw in terms of the region as compared to other regions as well. Yes.
That's a great response. Thank you so much. The next question is terrorism in the Caribbean religiously motivated?
Yes.
And then there's another question to it. And how prominent is the notion of terrorism in the Caribbean?
Right. So that's a very good question as well. And I think it is in two parts. So I will have to answer the first. And I think in answering the first part, it might also answer some of the questions that are coming in the chat as well. So as it relates to religious dimensions and terrorism within the Caribbean context, is what I found is that religion does in fact play a role, but not in isolation, to other meaningful factors as well, such as social, psychological, and so on. Religion, however, seems to be more used within the context of radicalization. Sorry about that. And also recruitment as well. And, and also another aspect of religion is the fact that a lot of persons who migrated were not well versed in the Muslim faith. And if they were more versed in the Muslim faith, it is actually more of a counter to them joining terrorism as opposed to them using it to join terrorism. So a lot of the persons who migrated to join ISIS based on the religious aspect were persons who were not well versed in the Muslim faith. And also, what I find is that quite a lot of them tend to lean in more to the extremist version of Islam, and that is called Wahhabism. So that part, in terms of where religion comes in, is where it comes in more. So it is more used as a tool to both radicalize and also recruit persons as well to join ISIS. As it relates to how prominent is a threat of terrorism within the Caribbean, for right now, it is placed on the low level. It is not on the high level. So more low to moderate level of threat. But that's how I think regional bodies as well as governments have the threat of terrorism. For me, however, I will argue that I think it's a bit more higher than that. And one of the reasons why it is because we do not focus on a critical aspect of terrorism, and that is what you call lone wolf terrorism. When I peruse the anti-terrorism legislations or any document, they don't really talk about lone wolf terrorism, and that is a serious threat. Because what you found, groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda have been sort of engaging in what I call leaderless resistance, but also lone wolf terrorism as well. And that I think is one of the major threats to the region, given the fact that it's also easy for somebody to engage in a sort of Mumbai style terrorist attack, where they can pick up a gun, go on one of our beaches, and just kill a lot of persons. And also the threat is to US and North America, but also European interests in the region as well. And also attacking tourists as well as what we call soft targets. So that is the threat, I will argue, that is within the region, but also ISIS using the region as a means to also attack the United States and our European allies as well, given the fact that quite a lot of us are also visa-free to many of these states, but also the visa process is not so difficult as well. So I will argue that those are some of the loopholes in which we have to close, and those are some of the threats within the region.
Thank you so much. All right, so moving on to the next question, this is more related to your experience as a researcher. How did you collect your data for for doing a research on this topic? And apart from literature review, did you do only surveys, or did you combine focus group discussions as part of the methodology for your data collection?
Very, very good question as well. Yes, so what I did is that I did elite interviews, and I also did focus group, and I also did documents as well. So I collected the data three ways, and what I found after doing convergence and also triangulation, and which I think that some of the persons who are doing qualitative research would be familiar with such terms. After triangulating the data, what I found is that majority of the research, the data, the rich information came from the elite interviews. But also the focus group was equally important to the study because it was important also to get young persons' perspective of terrorism, um, because that will also inform how we develop the educational programs as well. So I interviewed persons who are university students as well, because that is the target audience. The documents were important to see what are the current counterterrorism policies? What do they address and what do they not address, even if explicitly or even tacitly? And what I found within the documents is they don't address the issue of lone wolf terrorism. It might be um, implicit, but it is not clear. There was one of the documents that talked about the mobile style attack, and but most of the documents did not really cover the issue of homegrown terrorism or even lone wolf terrorism as well. And I think that is a serious threat, given that ISIS sort of, is engaging in terrorist activities through lone wolf terrorism as well. And when I say engaging, what I also mean is that you will have persons who might carry out an attack in terrorism in the name of ISIS. They don't need to get a directive from ISIS. But oftentimes, when they carry out an attack, they carry out this attack within the name of ISIS as well. And that, I believe, is a serious threat to the region, given that we're highly dependent on tourists coming from regions that are targets or soft targets for groups such as ISIS and Al Qaeda as well. Yes.
Related to your research work, there's another question.
Yes.
What are the potential suggestions from your research to prevent terrorism in both the Caribbean and globally?
And
Globally.
okay, yes. So first, globally, I will say in order to prevent terrorism from the global standpoint, is first we need to clearly distinguish what is terrorism and what is not terrorism. And I have to say this because oftentimes when you look at the media, particularly international media, they have a tendency to link terrorism to a particular group of persons engage in who engage in terroristic violence, or even persons who don't really engage in violence that are not deemed as terrorism. But they label it as such because the person may come from a particular group or narrative. And on the other hand, if another group of persons engage in such, they don't deem it as terrorism. And I believe this in many ways makes it difficult for us to effectively tackle the issue of terrorism. So we need to clearly define and also identify what is terrorism and what terrorism is not. Also, the media has to play a more sort of, I should say, a counterterrorism role. And I say this to say that when the media constantly and repeatedly report on terrorism, and this is where the sort of symbiotic relationship between the media and terrorism comes in, because it is difficult for the media not to report on acts of terrorism, but at the same time, when they do, it is to the benefit of the terrorists as well, who wants their message to be carried out. But what the media can do is sort of tone down the sort of rhetoric and how they package and present it. And because they play into the hands of terrorism goal. And part of that goal is not just only a political one, but it's also a psychological one. And this is why terrorism is also deemed a subspecies a subspecies as well, because of the psychological impact or the psychological element that is involved in terrorism. That is to spread fear, that is to intimidate as well, so they can convey their message to a wider audience. And so those will be some of the issues that I will say. And also, to combat terrorism, you cannot just simply use military action alone, because military means actually plays into the hands of terrorism. When you use military means, what you are essentially doing is providing more material for terrorist groups to use as a mean to radicalize and also recruit persons. Take, for instance, if you look at the Iraq War, before the Iraq War and before the 9/11, there wasn't an ISIS. ISIS came out in 2014, and many scholars have argued and have all concluded that the Iraq War played a pivotal role in the creation of the Islamic State. So you need to tackle terrorism from an ideological standpoint. Yes, of course, sometimes kinetic means might be important, but it should not be the main one. And within the Caribbean region as well, we also have to sort of educate our young folks and our educated young individuals about the risk of terrorism. We need to also address a lot of the issues, the social issues in terms of a sense of marginalization as well. And we also need to address the economic issues. Now, economic factors such as poverty, inequality, unemployment are not causes, but they are what is known as a risk factor that makes it more likely for persons to want to join terrorism. And so we need to address the risk factors involved in combating terrorism within the region. So I answered, okay. Yes, I'm waiting.
Sorry, I was reading at all the really great comments that have come in the chat box. But I'm also a bit conscious of time. There has been one request from a participant, Muke, who would like to unmute themselves and share some thought, or I guess ask a question. So Muke, would you like to unmute yourself and share your thoughts?
Okay, Eva. Yes, Eva, thank you very much for your time. I've already actually made the comments on the, but just to summarize with my brother, brilliant point, brilliant issue, things that touches us every day in all of our societies we live. I'm currently a PhD scholar at Bournemouth University. So, and this is one topic we've just dealt with, last week in one of our tutorials. So I actually, my study area is disaster management, and there is a direct correlation of this to also from human disaster. So we actually need to look at this subject very critically, because the sooner we narrow our ideas on the area of the recent terroristic acts, like the ones from the ISIS or what, our whole idea is blurred around, religion concept comes in, and then we start to Islamize the issue. But in my own opinion, terrorism has been as old as man, because we have always, one way or the other, moved in a way to have a change in our social lives, economic lives, and political lives. And that's the reason some people can behave in a way where I want to tell Eva, this is my way, way I want my life to be, but if I'm not giving chance, then there comes in terrorism, boom. I've listed some historical facts on my chat box, like the one in 1905, when Guy Fawkes and others attempted to bomb the House of Lords in England. That is way back 1905. And there is also the Indian Revolution in terms of anti-colonialism, when they were killing British officials. This all was in favor for them to have a political right. I've listed them there, and I have some links to that. So that is just my modest comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
much.
Thank
wonderful, you. Yes. Thank you.
Great. Unfortunately, we will have to end the webinar here. I know there have been some really great questions in the chat box, but as always in the CSE Development in Action webinar series, you do have the opportunity to get in touch with our webinar speaker and connect further and discuss the webinar topic further with them. And as you can see on the screen, you see Emanuel's email address and also their name on LinkedIn. So please feel free to connect with Emanuel to discuss the topic further. If you are from the Caribbean region, if you'd like to know more about his work on this topic, or in general, if you'd like to know more about this topic, wherever you are across the Commonwealth, please feel free to get in touch with Emanuel. Build a connection, share your thoughts, share your ideas, do ask your questions, and take this discussion further. With this, I would love to thank everyone for sending your questions in the chat box, as well as in the registration form. Sorry. As I said, I'm so sorry we'll not be able to take in more questions today, but I do hope that you continue this discussion further. Emanuel, thank you so much for presenting this webinar topic. This has been such a unique topic for all of us to understand more in terms of the Caribbean context. As you can see, most of us had not heard about terrorist activities in the Caribbean. So this has been an eye-opener, and I'm sure that, you know, we can learn more through your book, as well as, you know, through just general research on the topic. I would just quickly go through the slide where your book is mentioned. if you would like to share a few thoughts on how, if someone wants to get hold of your book, how they can do that.
Yes, so for those of you who are in the UK, well, I guess all of you, or
Most of you, yes.
most of you, right, who are studying, you should be able to get it from Waterstones. You will get it from Barnes and Noble as well. So I'm not sure if they are in the store physically, but I know that they are selling the book as well. So if they don't have any in stock right now, you can go to those stores and order the book. You can also get it on Amazon as well. So it's on all Amazon platform. Wherever you are, you will be able to get it as well. It is also located in other places, but those are the main ones that I think, as it relates to Commonwealth scholars, would be able to get a copy of the book as well. You can also purchase the book in e-book format if you go on Springer Nature website as well. But if you guys are like me, who like the hard copy, and not really a fan of the e-book, I will say that you can buy it at Waterstones, and you can also buy it at Barnes and Noble for those of you who are in the UK. But if they don't have any in stock, you can go in and order it, and they will order a copy or two for you as well. Yes.
Great. Thank you so much.